All right. Okay. So, Mario Kart Super Circuit released just a few months after the Game Boy Advance in 2001, and while it's now thought of as one of the lesser Mario Karts, it was a critical smash at the time. And I mean, being the first portable Mario Kart game ever is going to win you a lot of brownie points. It was specifically praised for its 4-player link cable multiplayer. And your friends didn't even need to have copies of the game. 4 people could play 4-player on just one cartridge. But if your friends all have copies of the GBA port of The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, you could get together and play the first Zelda multiplayer game ever, 4 Swords. Everybody was getting in on the action. Even Kirby had his own 4-player link cable madness with his game, The Amazing Mirror, a 4-player open world game where up to 4 people had their own Kirby on their own screen, on their own system, and a whole huge world to explore however they wanted to. This was a golden age of multiplayer couch fun for console games, and not just the GBA. Halo ruled every college dorm in the early 2000s with 16-player deathmatch by linking 4 systems together. Provided your eyes didn't strain from squinting at 1/4 of a 12-inch tube TV. And then we all said with a straight face, no screen looking, right guys? Right? No screen looking. But I was screen looking. I saw you were going for that rocket launcher, you motherfucker. Not to be outdone, Mario Kart Double Dash could link up 8 GameCubes with 2 people per screen for 16-player Mario Kart action. Provided that you could even find the GameCube broadband adapter that allowed system linking, and that no one invited this guy to the party. It's me. I was that guy. I was. If you really had cash to burn in 2004, scoop up 10 copies of Steel Battalion Line of Contact and 10 copies of its ridiculous 40-button controller. Then find 9 other people who have ever played Steel Battalion and its ridiculous 40-button controller. 10 copies. Altogether was $2,000 when it was new. And things only took off with the Nintendo DS. Mario Kart DS is 8 players with just 1 cart. Puyo Pop Fever, also 8 players with just 1 cart. Tetris DS, 10 players with just 1 cart. Be the king of your Nihongo Benkyokai with this Japanese dictionary that is apparently 16 players. I have always wanted to try Resident Evil DS's 4-player mode. With 8 copies of this Korg synthesizer, you and 7 friends can have the ultimate jam session. And then of course there was Smash Bros for the Wii U, which was 8 players, and you could use all the controllers, including a 3DS as a controller, and then Runbow. Runbow for the Wii U, give it up, 9 players. 9! What we talking about again? Right, but all these gotta bow down to the original, the one that really kicked it all off way back then. F1 Race for the Game Boy. The 1991 4-player racing game for the original Game Boy that came packaged with its own 4-player adapter. At least in North America. Fun fact, it was sold separately in Japan. Alright, just kidding, of course. The actual original, let's talk about it. 1990s, Todd's Adventure in Slime World for the Atari Lynx. I mean, there was also Checkered Flag, Battle Wheels, which each had 6-player multiplayer modes, but it was Slime World that allowed you to hook up 8 Atari Lynx systems. 8 of them. And if you don't know what an Atari Lynx is, that is because I am gonna die 20 years before you do. Okay, but actually, there is one game that bests all of these in terms of time released and number of players. In December 1991, the original Game Boy would receive its first and only first-person shooter, Faceball 2000. A technical marvel for its time, and though it would be outdone by the likes of X, Race Drivin', and the unreleased Game Boy Color game Tyrannosaurus Tex, Faceball 2000 has the distinction of being released only 1 month after a little game called Catacomb 3D, and 6 months before Catacomb 3D's spiritual successor, another little game called Wolfenstein 3D. Yeah, contemporary reviews refer to this game as a 3D Pac-Man, not an FPS, not even a Doom clone, because that's how old we're talking here. As an FPS, it is about as rudimentary as possible, but it's still a fully functioning 3D experience, even if you're only shooting white balls at emojis, which are actually smiloids because this game predates the word emoji as well. But its true claim to fame stands above even all of this, the thing that makes Faceball 2000 truly a legendary game. This game, released in 1991 for the original Game Boy, has a multiplayer mode that supports up to 16 players. 16! A baker's dozen plus 3 more, making it truly one of the most ambitious games of all time. A game punching so freaking high above its weight. And that's just amazing, right? 16 Game Boys, 16 link cables, all daisy-chained together. What a ridiculous sight that must be. But here's the thing. No one's ever seen it. It's never actually happened. There has never been a documented 16-player game of Faceball 2000, not even an emulation. I mean, just getting all that stuff together, the time and money investment would just be ridiculous. But surely, over the last 30 years, somebody has had the most ridiculous and stupid party of all time, right? And surely, someone broke out the camcorder, snapped a Polaroid, recorded it on their Talkboy, uploaded a photo to MySpace, made a grainy 480p YouTube video. But no, remember that 8-player Atari Lynx game, Slime World? Who has 8 Atari Lynxes and 8 Atari Blink cables? Here is a YouTube video uploaded in 2012. 8-player Slime World has happened. Okay, who in the world has 10 Steel Battalion controllers? PAX has been doing this on and off for over a decade. Here are some pictures from PAX East 2024. But look all you want. People have attempted it, but a 16-player game of Faceball 2000 has never happened. Ever. And like, is it even possible then? Is it true? I feel like I've known about this fabled 16-player Game Boy game for the, oh god, like it's the nearly 20 years I've been talking about weird and obscure video game stuff here on YouTube. It's been on my bucket list for a long time, but man, 16 copies of that game, 16 Game Boys, 16 cables, like, just never felt like it was in the cards. Never really was gonna happen. But then, in fall 2022, as the world emerged from the COVID-19 lockdown, opportunity knocked, and suddenly I had the chance to test this 16-player Game Boy game of legend myself. What I couldn't have known is it would start a 2-year journey to uncover the truth. I've been talking about weird video game mysteries my entire career, and I have had videos age poorly in both flattering and unflattering ways. But I had never been a part of that history. This project took me halfway across the country. I met the creators of this game. I made new friends. And with these friends, we uncovered the truth behind this 30-year mystery, and we achieved the first 16-player game of Faceball 2000. It's one of the craziest things I have done in my career, and friends, join me, because this is that story.
Have a nice day!
Hey, I'm Derek, it's me, Derek, and welcome to Stop Skeletons from Fighting. And check me out, I'm trying like a different format for this video. I shot this video over the span of many weeks, actually many months, many months. So keep an eye out for things like continuity errors, like my hair and beard changing, stuff in the background, a little bonus meta video for you if you're paying attention. Okay, let's go. Faceball 2000 was developed by Xanth Software FX and published by Bulletproof Software, or as they are now known, the Tetris Company, and yes, we will be coming back to that. Like I mentioned earlier, Faceball isn't even the most impressive 3D game for the Game Boy. I made a video about that topic a few years ago. But when it dropped in December 1991, the system was just over 2 years old. I mean, people were still getting used to the idea of playing Tetris on the go. Having a full 360-degree world to explore was truly an achievement. It made a splash with decent reviews and a fair amount of press in gaming magazines at the time. Even today, there is a charm to its simplicity. I mean, solid fundamentals will always beat out fancy and flashy. Maybe not a system essential, but it is still a great little game. It must have been a modest hit because 6 months later in the summer of '92, Bulletproof Software dropped the Super Nintendo port, which had split-screen multiplayer, one of the earliest examples of split-screen first-person shooter action. There was also a cancelled NES port, which I'm sure would have given Rescue the Embassy mission a run for its money as the premier FPS experience on the NES. From there, a new team, Riverhill Soft, would bring Face to Japan only, with ports to the Game Gear and PC Engine CD2, aka TurboGrafx Super CD. And you gotta give this port its flowers for having 4-player split-screen FPS in 1993 on a system with only 1 controller port. That is one of the most punching weight things I've ever seen. And lastly, a cancelled port for the Virtual Boy renamed Nico-chan Battle, which was at some point set to drop in March 96 and would have been the system's only full 3D FPS. And of course, because there are few communities more thorough than the Virtual Boy community, the leaked prototype of Nico-chan Battle is out there for you to check out, and I would recommend checking it out. It's odd though that this is the only one that has a more fitting name. Nico-chan means smiley face in Japanese. I don't know why you keep the name Faceball around when your country already has a native word for that. I don't know. Nico-chan, or Faceball, didn't just will itself into this world. Like all great technical and artistic achievements, it stands on the shoulders of the giants before it. Faceball 2000 is a port/remake of MIDI Maze, released 4 years earlier in 1987 for the Atari ST. But MIDI Maze itself is a spiritual follow-up to the original elder god of the FPS, 1973's Maze. MIDI Maze gets its namesake from the original game and the MIDI cables that could be used to link up 16 systems together for what may be the original FPS deathmatch multiplayer game. But credit where credit is due, multiplayer was all you could do in MIDI Maze, either with bots or other people. Faceball on the Game Boy has a beefy 75-stage single-player campaign, putting their own unique stamp on the concept. Though, as a tribute, all 4 versions of Faceball 2000 feature MIDI Maze's default map in multiplayer. Fun bit of history here. While the term deathmatch is attributed to John Romero and Doom, and Romero has stated that its benchmark games, Wolfenstein 3D and Doom, were not inspired by MIDI Maze, doesn't change the fact that it was here almost 6 years earlier. Oh, and yes, I have had people walk up to me and say they are trying to get 16 Atari STs together for conventions. May our booths one day sit together. MIDI Maze is also where Faceball got its iconic, cheeky, sarcastic humor. For 1987, this cover art was like the height of humor. But to this day, it's still endearing to be greeted with, "Have a nice day," when you get fragged in a match. But despite all of this, despite this 3-decade legacy of Maze, MIDI Maze, and Faceball 2000, it is the Game Boy port that is remembered the most. And that is solely because it is a 16-player multiplayer game for the original Game Boy. And speaking just for me, that is too amazing to not want to see it for yourself. So this journey started in earnest in 2022, but how I got into this whole mess is kind of a funny story, the seeds of which were planted all the way back in 2018. While producing our video on the GBA e-reader, we struggled to find pictures and information about advertised but unreleased e-reader cards. But we found a user by the name of Uncle Bob, who, near as we could tell on the English-speaking web at least, was the only person who documented these obscure e-reader cards. We actually used Uncle Bob's info and scanned pictures without crediting him, and this is when he reached out to us and asked to give him credit, which is something we honestly should have done in the first place, so we quickly gave Bob credit in the video description and a pinned comment after we uploaded the video. Please don't tell H-Bomber Guy.
Now, I could just systematically own Derek for all the stupid shit he says over the course of the video.
The next year, in 2019, we decided to finally cover Faceball 2000's Game Boy port. The story goes that the dev team wanted to ship Faceball 2000 with a special 16-player adapter, to which Nintendo said, "What? No. What? Dude, no." But the ability for 16 players was still in the game. One could still do it themselves by daisy-chaining together 16 systems. However, when we looked for footage of this for our video, the best we could find was also the earliest recorded attempt, which was in 2008 as documented on an ancient thread on Nintendo World Report forums posted by the user Uncle Bob? Wait, the same Uncle Bob we met last year for the GBA e-reader cards? And yeah, it was the same guy. Turns out he's just into weird video game stuff like us. And while he was not successful in getting a full 16-player game going, we were able to pick his brain and ask him all sorts of questions. He found that using multiple 4-player adapters, the ones available at the time, wouldn't work. But by using a mix of Game Boy systems and GBA link cables, he was able to get a game of 9 going. He suspected that maybe certain cables or connection ports were faulty, but the process of finding and weeding out the bad ones was something they just didn't have time for in this meetup. Oh, and we would learn soon enough just how logistically complicated this whole thing can get. And also, yo, shouts to PhotoBucket. Shouts to anyone who remembers when posting pictures online, when you had to upload them to PhotoBucket first. God damn, this whole story really running through decades. He also mentioned that all these years later, it's still something he'd always wanted to try again someday. He still had all the stuff for it, all the games, all the systems and cables. Unfortunately, he lived across the country. But we emailed back and forth for a few months in the spring of 2019. I mean, would it be worth it to fly to a stranger's house, or maybe meeting in the middle and film something for the channel? But by the end of 2019, communications stopped as life got in the way for both of us. Then years later, out of the blue, we get an email from who else? Uncle Bob. By then it was spring 2022, and I think we were all looking for some extra companionship after all that time in COVID-19 lockdown. Bob asked us if we were still interested in maybe meeting up and trying the 16-player game. He still had all the stuff, which, was the biggest hurdle, or at least we thought was the biggest hurdle, but we started talking again about maybe meeting up and giving this a shot. And while Uncle Bob and producer Grace and I are all emailing each other, the person really carrying the banner for Faceball 2000 was Retronaut Jeremy Parrish. Though not the first, he was the most visible person attempting the elusive 16-player Faceball 2000 game. In 2018, he announced that at the Midwest Gaming Classic in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, they were going to make history and have the impossible deathmatch. They had a big meetup with fans, and it unfortunately was a bust. We covered both this and Uncle Bob's unsuccessful attempts in our 2019 video. But there was an interesting development a couple years later, a custom-built 16-player adapter. All 16 systems plugged right into the same box? Like fresh parts too, not relying on cords manufactured 20 years ago, and maybe something approximating what the original team wanted to ship with the game. But check that date. Yes, there were big plans for Faceball in 2020, but they did not happen. And maybe Parrish was feeling that post-lockdown itch in 2022 as well, because in September he announced that at the Portland Retro Expo he was going to try it again and he was going to use that custom-made 16-player adapter. I responded that I would absolutely be there. Who else responded? Of course, Uncle Bob did. I think if anyone is talking about Faceball on the internet, it is either Uncle Bob or Uncle Bob has responded to them. Now, for Grace and I, living in Seattle, Washington, Portland is a brisk 3-hour drive, depending on traffic, or a cheap bus ticket. We had already planned to go low-key, just to meet up with friends we hadn't seen in person since before lockdown. But Bob would have to fly across the country. But he was ready to do it if it meant finally getting access to that custom adapter and possibly, finally, making this happen. But a week before the convention, Jeremy Parrish announced he was canceling the Faceball meetup in Portland with hopes to try it again at the Midwest Gaming Classic in Milwaukee, where his 2018 attempt had happened. This was disappointing news, but we'd already been talking about meeting up with Bob in Portland to film stuff. We had hoped to try the fabled custom adapter, but he was confident that we didn't need it. He had recently dug up all his stuff and tested it out, and not only did it all still work, he was able to get up to 15 players going. Yo, that is so close. We don't need the adapter. So long as Bob was down to fly to Portland, we can still do this ourselves. We could finally do what we'd been kicking around since 2019. Bob was already packing his 16+ copies of Faceball, Game Boys of all varieties, and a Rat King of link cables. We just needed bodies, a place to set up, and to film the whole thing. The reason we were going originally was just to hang out with friends, but it turns out 16-player Faceball was something few people turned down. I mean, if you hang out with me long enough, I'm probably going to rope you into something weird. Don't ever hide who you are to people that care about you. So, games, systems, cords, and we got bodies. Now we needed a location. This was too last minute to contact the con themselves. Technically, Portland Retro had no idea we were doing this, but we wanted an unannounced low-key meetup so that we could take the time to test and experiment. We contacted our friends at the Video Game History Foundation, who always have a huge space at Portland Retro, and we asked if we could set up shop in the corner late in the day for just a couple hours. And again, the power of Faceball opens doors, and they said yes, absolutely. And then suddenly, this was happening. We had a guy with all the stuff. We had friends who were down and a place to do it. This was happening. We were finally going to test Faceball 2000's 16-player mode for ourselves. Grace and I packed a bunch of gear and drove down to Portland, Oregon. We stayed at an Airbnb that was 10 minutes from the convention and had a Pez collection. Check out the Pez house in Portland and tell them Uncle Derek sent you. And then on October 15th, 2022, at approximately 4 p.m. Pacific, we set up shop next to a complete boxed N64 collection inside the Video Game History Foundation's room. Spirits were high even as we were just setting up.
Something we're missing. Who are you?
You
know who I am.
Say it.
Derek, meet Derek, and welcome to some bullshit that we're doing here. Welcome to Punching Weight.
So to pull this off, I packed a tiny TV, my GameCube and GBA player, and a capture card to record direct gameplay footage. We set up 2 cameras on either end of the table. Grace walked around with a monopod and filmed the action up close, and then our friend Xeon from Nintendo Life showed up and shot a bunch of extra footage for us too.
Oh, hey, Xeon. I'm gonna say this. I can't talk right now. I'm having to find my life right now.
We didn't know what the hell was ahead of us, but the journey is the reward with this kind of stuff, and that's why it's so fun.
If it works, it'll be history. If it doesn't, it'll be a glorious dumpster fire. We tried our best.
Beautiful dumpster fire.
Yeah. Either way, I'm not a gambling man. I win either way.
And once we got it all set up, it was time to go. And this right here is Uncle Bob in the flesh. You can always tell him by that signature flame hat. And not to get too ahead of myself here, but I have seen Bob, that he has multiple hats, I guess, in case one breaks. Now, with him being the expert, or really the only person with any experience with this, he walks us through the process of getting this all to work. Of course, no one there was expecting this to be easy, but we were all motivated.
This might be a fucking mistake, but we're all here together, okay?
The GBA link cable is a box with 2 ends, a purple one and a gray one, and a port in the middle. The 2 ends are different colors, but they're otherwise the same. This is important because it turns out because of how it was designed, you cannot use 4 4-player adapters. Or actually, you need 7, but that's just not how they work. You need to make a daisy chain with GBA link cables. How they're supposed to work is player 1 and 2 link up normally. Then player 3 connects the purple end to the port in the middle and the gray end to their system. And then player 4 links up with player 3, purple end in the port, gray end in the system. But that player 1 and player 2 connection, what if instead of a system, that the purple end went into another port? This is what Bob figured out all those years ago. Just keep adding until you've got 16. Theoretically, you could connect as many systems as you want so long as you just close the loop by connecting back between 3 and 4. Seems easy enough, but these cables were all made around 20 years ago, and almost all of them were bought secondhand. There are third-party cables you can buy brand new today, but I wouldn't say that they're really any better or more reliable, and used first-party cables still tend to be cheaper. So the real challenge here will be to find the fail spots in the chain, which systems or cords or connections were the problems, and syncing up all the systems to start together. And actually, the first problem was my GameCube's system battery being dead and it booting me to the system menu instead of loading the game. An issue I did not anticipate. We are off to a great start here.
So everybody's at the title screen? Yeah. Except for me? Yes. Okay.
Bob points out that on the main menu, it tells you how many players are connected. If this were working, it would say 16 players ready. But after 5 attempts, Bob suggests we try 2 games of 8 with the hope that one group will not be able to start and then we can narrow down the fail point from there. So we split the 2 groups down the middle. We all start up together now that we're all finally gotten that down pretty well.
Both sides work.
And success! But if both groups of 8 work, then where's the fail point? Is it between players 8 and 9?
Well, let's just play a quick game of 8. Why not? Yeah, we've been sitting here for long enough.
All right. This one's on red now.
Do we have to press anything, or does it follow? Oh, I think it froze.
It froze.
It did!
Yep, both sides freeze. Never mind. This is where we learn that just because you successfully get a number on the title screen does not mean victory yet.
Can you believe it did not work perfectly?
No!
Whoa!
Maybe this is why it's never been done.
We regroup and we try 2 8-player games again, but the technical issues are not the only ones to worry about here. There's also proper communication in a noisy room with all 16 people working with you, and making sure that everyone is on the same page.
3, 2, 1.
Groups of 8, right?
What?
2 individual groups of 8, right?
Yes. Okay. You distracted me, but that's okay.
And then, of course, there's the fact that these GBAs are decades old, and the power switches can be touchy.
2, 1, go.
Oh, mine, it turned on and it flickered off. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Attempt number 8. Again, gets both groups to the menu, but stuck on the menu. All right, so I guess 4 games of 4-player then? We're having almost no luck at all. But then MVG, Modern Vintage Gamer himself, pops up to say hi. Here is his face for a frame. Here is the back of his head. We had 4 cameras.
I'm trying to get this 16-player Faceball, and it's not working so well. I'm gonna fix it. Yes.
Not talking to him for a minute. That was a nice little morale boost.
We're gonna keep trying. Yeah. We're not gonna give up.
But this is about 45 minutes in. We have not had a single successful game. But then attempt number 9, 4 games of 4, seems to work for everyone. We can finally play this game. I'm actually so excited to finally play that I don't even notice that one group is actually having issues, and I'm maybe not being the best host. Our game wraps up. Fushi won. I'm not jealous. But we finally have something that we can work on and actually start making some progress. Because 8 didn't work, but 3 sets of 4 did. How is that possible?
4 players ready.
4.
Let's go.
We're on.
All right.
Okay,
The other group manages to get their 4-player game going, so we must have a semi-decent set of systems and chords here, right?
Let's just try one and just keep working ourselves down. And I never even knew that. Theoretically, we'll find out the problem. Shut up.
So let's start with 4 and just add 1 more until it doesn't work, which probably won't happen since every machine has had a successful 4-player game. Right? We don't make a lot of progress, but we do make progress.
Trying to figure that out.
Successfully did 6 and was locking up on 7. Yeah, we're taking that one out for now.
Bob is making double sure that each plug is snug as can be, and attempts number 10 through number 16 do not get past 6 players, and no amount of chord swapping seems to do the trick. The idea was that we'd be able to find a pattern for what reliably works and what reliably doesn't work. Cables? Well, how about the ports on the systems? The connection thingy on the cable itself? Turning on in unison? Does it matter who hits start? And when do you hit start? Does it matter who pushes start? Do they become the first player? Is who is ever the first player important? Is it maybe that copy of the game?
We got 7.
But then attempt 19, we successfully get into a 7-player game, with the difference seeming to be that the first player needs to be in charge.
They just had successfully a 7. Yeah. And
Trying to get to 8 now.
now we're working on to 8. Halfway. We'll get to halfway, baby.
And then it feels like we're onto something because soon we get 8 going on attempt 21. There was then the idea of putting all the Game Boys flat on the table to prevent any potential chord jostling. I'm about to jump back in myself when this person just walks up to me and gives me an Xbox Silent Scope rifle and a copy of Starsky and Hutch. I will take your video game trash if you offer it to me, yes. The energy in the group was starting to wane. We're well into our first hour here, but we get our second wind once we have 8 players down solid. We're convinced that timing is crucial and that the first person in the chain needs to be the captain. It happens that Gilly the Kid is actually a musician and has a better sense of timing than me, so I let him take charge.
3, 2, 1, go.
We quickly become a tight group.
Go.
By attempt number 30, we hit 9 players. The match only lasts 20 seconds, but hey, we'll take it. Also, 9 players, that puts us ahead of Mario Kart DS and just behind Tetris DS, which is not bad, but we didn't come here to settle for 9 or even 10en players.
Even if you get 2 seconds of the game, it still counts. We'll be in the 16.
The number 16 appears on the screen.
We win.
Get pizza, we did it. And I want to make sure this is clear. At this point, we're about an hour and 15 minutes into this, and everyone was still so focused, still having fun. We didn't lose anybody. In fact, behind us, the crowd was slowly growing. Actually, that's not true. We had a few slackers. And how do I know this? Because in this article from Time Extension, they of course had to do a story about the Video Game History Foundation's exhibit. And who is this slacking off while we over here putting in the work? Ant Dude and Connor? You thought I wouldn't find out? It wasn't easy to get from 6 to 7 to 8 to 9, but 10 players seems to be a genuine wall. Attempt 31, our first attempt at 10, we successfully get to the menu, but it freezes. And we think it's because we waited too long?
Does it actually show 10 players this time?
Yeah, it does say 10 players on it.
Attempt 33, Fushi's screen just totally glitches out. Attempt 35. Fushi's screen says she's the 12th player, with there's only 10 systems hooked up.
Which to me says that there's more hardware bullshit going on with the cables.
5 failures in a row. We decide to reorder all the cables. And it's around here I realize that there are maybe too many cooks in the kitchen here. If I knew it was going to be this logistically difficult, I would have just done this with Bob and Grace in a conference room. But you know, it's still a whole lot of fun to have the whole group here all coming together for something. It's easy to lose sight of this, but again, the journey is the reward here. Attempt 36, we notice that the numbers on the screen don't always add up for everyone. Like how many players are connected, and logically, which player is the right number. Maybe turning them on all at the same time is overloading the cords? We're really grasping for anything here. Attempt 40, we try staggering each system for powering on. Attempt 42, we start trying in groups, which actually has some success, but it locks up again. But at the arena selection menu at least, which is one step past the main menu. At this point, that is progress enough for us to feel robbed. But this is when Grace informs us that we have only a half hour left. We have been at this for 90 minutes.
All right, guys. I know we're all trying really hard. We only have 30 more minutes.
Okay.
Camera batteries are also starting to die. We decided to get 2 games of 8 again. That was the last time we had any kind of success.
Trying to get 16-player Faceball.
Oh, sick.
Heavy emphasis on the trying. Yeah.
Everyone is feeling defeated, but frustrated. Like, it shouldn't be this hard, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, I know. It's like it's the video so far. It's gonna be, look at this shit show we did. Like and subscribe.
I mean, it's in the damn game. But Bob is the expert, and he's done a game of 11, and it didn't matter which systems either. He had the whole gamut.
And you've done it with 11.
I did it with 11.
With a bunch of different kinds of, with a Game Boy player, with the SP, with the Game Boy Advance.
Super Game Boy 2.
Yeah.
Did it take, you said you did 11?
Did 11.
Did it take you multiple tries?
Yes.
How many tries did it take?
I don't know, not this many.
After taking a break and brainstorming a bit, we're down to the final 20 minutes. Soon, we'll have to go home, and this was really all for nothing. We set up 16 systems, 2 8-player games. We are fairly confident that we have weeded out all the bad systems and cables. I also get the GameCube up and running again, so I can get some raw gameplay footage. While we are double checking everything, this girl in a cool jacket walks up and watches us. Attempt 45, my screen says 9 for some reason. Okay, that is not good. But we're still having fun though.
Like 8 years old in 2000, like
You and your 15 years.
trying to do this.
On the playground in between classes.
It does look like
Recess is almost over. Worst Christmas morning ever.
We start double checking all the cords again, and while we're doing that, I overhear that girl in the cool jacket talking to Gilly and Andude about link cables. Sounds like she might know a thing or two about them. Like a lot of people, she came into the Video Game History Foundation's exhibit, but couldn't help but notice this group of weirdos all huddled around some tables. But instead of just asking, "What is this?" and then backing away slowly, she starts asking about how this is even technically possible and spitballing possible electrical issues we could be having with all this 20-year-old tech. Attempt 47 is 9 players! And immediately locks up. While we're busy with attempt 48, Cool Jacket Girl and Bob start chatting. We're down to literally the final 5 minutes, and we lock up on the menu again. Attempt 49, we have a misfire with these old temperamental GBAs. Attempt 50, here we go, this is it. And by the way, I know that sounds like I made that up, but I went through all this footage, all 2 hours of footage, all 4 cameras. I swear to you, it was 50. It was a magical night. But while we're waiting for the game to load, I overhear Cool Jacket Girl again. She's talking about cables and like ideas about what we could do, and she again catches my attention.
I think nothing short of like soldering custom cords is really gonna make this work, but we'll still try.
You actually have a
Can you make 16 of these in 20 minutes right now?
We finally get a game of 9, and I get it on video with the GameCube. But of course, it crashes. And you know what? I'm gonna let this last part just play.
We replayed
Yeah, we just started chanting Faceball. I don't know. But that is what 2 hours of shared delirium will do to you. So many cables, so many systems, and the best we do is 9. But every time it failed, everyone stayed so focused. No one was like, who cares? I'm done. It was always, okay, what can we do different? Let's go again. Every time. For 2 hours. It was amazing, and I can't thank enough everyone who was there. Shouts to Xeon for shooting extra footage that we didn't even ask him to do, Loxton, Gilly the Kid, Nick the Game Apologist, Channel Pub, Antude, Miss Fushi, David Almeida, Virtual Schlub, Connor the Waffle, Jacob Sam MK, you guys know who you are, and anyone who didn't sign in on the notebook or just stood around and cheered us on. I'm not joking, I met most of these people that night, and I made a bunch of new friends that night. Especially one person in particular. Towards the end of the day, we realized things weren't working out, but we didn't want to give up. We needed to operate way more scientifically. While, in theory, having 16 sets of hands is great, it was far more important to label the chords and systems and write down what was working. We all traveled here, and Portland Retro was a full weekend event. We had a whole other day, so Bob, Grace, and I had already decided to try this again tomorrow, but with fewer people in a more private place. But as we were finishing up, this girl in a cool jacket appears and starts asking questions. As I'm saying goodbye and thanking people and breaking things down, Cool Jacket Girl and Bob keep on chatting. Luckily, we forgot to turn off this camera at the end of the table, and we actually got this partially on video, but while Grace and I are packing things up, she walks up to me and we chat. She says her name is Zari and does both software and hardware modding, specifically Game Boy modding, and repairs as a hobby. It was clear that we were in way over our heads and we needed someone with real, actual knowledge, and she was really excited to help. Zari seemed cool, so I invite this stranger that I met only like a half hour earlier to come meet up with us tomorrow. She says yes, and we exchange info. Later that night, we get in touch with my friend, Chris, who works for the con, and he says he might be able to get us a private conference room or something. The next day, he gets us into the break room behind registration. Lots of space, huge tables, no foot traffic, and the entire rest of the day if we need it. I also want to make it clear, yeah, we were in the break area, but we didn't push any of the hardworking Portland Retro staff out or ruin their breaks. There was a lot of room back there. We took the table like in the back, in the corner by the wall, and we didn't make that much noise anyway because there wasn't really a whole lot of us. But we start setting back up. Bob texts sorry, and before you know it, we are back up and running with our new friend. She also asked not to be filmed with her mask off, which wasn't an issue because yesterday was super exhausting. We had a much simpler setup for filming this day. Right away, Zari starts jotting down ideas on how the link cable functions electronically, and she's looking up schematics online and jotting down notes. At one point, she mentions something about maybe voltage could be an issue? Probably not. Zari isn't able to come up with anything conclusive in her quick online sleuthing, but before long, we have everything set up and we're back to testing. 3 players, 4 players, 2 attempts to get 5 players, 6 players, 7 players. Within 20 minutes, we are cooking. But then it is 8 players where we start having trouble. 3 attempts to get 8, and we are not able to get 9 players. Menu corruption, locking up on the menu, not sensing any of the other systems, more menu corruption. It's time to go back down and try 8 again. But then suddenly, we can no longer get 8 working. It didn't feel like it, but a damn hour had flown by, and after failing to get 8 again, we take a Pac-Man break. We just needed a win. After this, I went and got some food, and you know what? I'd not stepped foot in the expo hall this entire weekend. Grace had so far taken the afternoon off. I wanted a little time to look around, but I didn't get far. While I was playing some Doom 32X and taking a pic to post on Twitter, I get a text from Grace. We're up to 12. Everyone else was feeling that fatigue setting in, except for the new girl. Not only has labeling and taking note of what is and what is not working helped tremendously, but we have a developing theory that Game Boy Advance SPs are untrustworthy because of their rechargeable batteries. When we finally get the cameras back up and running, we are up to 13. With 6 Game Boy Colors, 7 GBAs, 13 players is ready to go, but crashes when trying to start the match.
You're so close. You want to go back down to 12 just so we can show it off?
Yeah.
We go back down to 12, and we get into a match. Locks up 30 seconds in, but yes, hey, this is a new best, which our previous best from yesterday was 10 on the menu, 9 in a game, just in case you forgot. And it feels like 13 is so close. we're not exactly sure what is making these systems and cables working over the ones that aren't. But a few minutes later...
13.
Again? Okay.
Yes, 13 in the game this time.
In the game? Great.
Yes, 13. Now at first it looks like it's locked up, but the other systems are running, and so actually no, it's just running super slow. It is not locked up. We call anyone nearby to jump on, and it's everything I'd hoped it to be. A slowly running, barely functioning free-for-all. It's just utter chaos. But by some miracle, it never crashed. No one's system locked up, and we concluded what was probably the world's first 13-player match of Faceball 2000. My friend Loxton won the match. I'm not jealous.
You're the Faceball 2000 champ! Have a nice day.
But there's no stopping now. Minutes later, 14 players in-game, and I managed to have my GameCube connected, so I got raw gameplay footage. The match only lasts a few seconds, though. It is so close we can taste it. Just seeing the number 16 on that screen would be amazing. 15 is unfortunately a no-go. And we're starting to run out of systems here. Yes, even Uncle Bob only has so many Game Boys. Because after hours and hours of paying extra close attention to the cables, Zari has a hunch that it is the systems that are the issue, not the cables.
So actually the link cables weren't really an issue.
Not really. There were some that were bad.
Yeah, but it was mainly a power issue.
Yeah, mostly it was the power.
Okay.
For our next attempt of 15, we grabbed my yellow Game Boy Pocket that I know for a fact was not clean when I bought it and has never really been cleaned. But it's about all we have. However, something really odd happens with this group of 15.
15?
Yes, that's
Matt? What?
That was odd.
And yours said 14?
I thought that said 14.
That said 15.
It said player 14, but 15 players.
Yeah.
Okay, so white screen.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, we get all the way to the title screen, the main menu, the area selection menu, and we hear the battle start sound, and then nothing. Now what's odd is that sound. It usually doesn't play for that long. Usually it cuts off when the music starts in. It's like the game started, but the level didn't load. It was just too damn weird. And also, right as we cut, Bob asks an important question.
I just kind of thought of a concern. How fresh are...
Yeah, how fresh are the batteries in these systems? We've been at this for hours now, stretched over 2 days. It is something to consider. 6 Game Boy Colors, 7 Game Boy Advance, and my GameCube Game Boy Advance player, we are confident we have a rock-solid 14. What about systems 15 and 16? Not much else we can do except bring the GBA SPs back into the fold. And this time we crash on the main menu, not even getting into the arena selection. Enthusiasm is waning, but nothing like a little Game Boy Advance ASMR to lift the mood. The fourth attempt of 15 with the SPs in the mix is a no-go. I'm not gonna lie to you, at this point, I'm really starting to feel it. It was 5:30, the expo had been closed for a half hour, but we became convinced that we needed 2 Game Boy Colors or 2 Game Boy Advances, systems that ran off of replaceable batteries, not rechargeable ones.
Does anyone have connections that if we walk in there, we're not going to get tackled by security? Because I will literally go buy 2 Game Boy Colors.
This may be all that stands in our way.
So we're still in a game convention.
Right.
Like, you run out and see if you can't grab somebody, I don't know, we'll bribe them to let you back in there.
So Bob takes off even though the expo floor is closed. We keep testing while we're waiting for him to come back, and we're starting to wonder, should we just break this down? Should we move this to the hotel? Should we just keep pushing or just give up? But after like 10 minutes, we realized Bob hasn't come back yet. If he'd been turned away at the door, he'd be back by now. So he must be getting something. You see, luckily for us, the expo had officially closed, but no one had really started breaking things down because all eyes were on the Tetris World Championship finals that were still underway. The shadow of Tetris is never far from Faceball because while a historic Tetris throwdown was happening, a historic Faceball test was also happening just a few feet away.
And the The Portland Retro Gaming Expo, I believe, has officially closed, so we are going to figure out what we're going to do here. Everybody here left at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo probably has their eyes on this very match.
No, I am pretty sure there was at least one guy focused on something else.
You know, the people here are not able to buy stuff anymore.
I wouldn't be so sure, man.
So I've heard from High Command a very exciting announcement. We are allowed to play until midnight here at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo.
So because the Tetris World Championship was running long, Bob was able to get back into the expo and find someone to sell him 2 more Game Boy Colors. What's crazy is at the time I had no idea any of this was going on. I stumbled upon this while I was making this video. At the time I thought we had just gotten lucky, but nah man, it was Tetris. I hope they don't mind me using those quotes because I couldn't believe how perfect they were for this video. But anyway, Bob returns with 2 really cool looking Game Boy Colors. They're tested, they're working, and we add them to the chain. 16 players, the world record. Come on, the expo staff is gonna wanna go home eventually. But no. We go back down to 14, which we know worked, but with the 2 new Game Boy Colors, we gotta make sure they really do work, right? But also, it is now nearly 6 p.m. We're about 5 hours into this. There might have been some user error at this point. A first attempt at 14 with the new Game Boys locks up at the menu. Our second attempt gets to the Arena Select menu before locking up. While we talk for a bit, Grace gets some great B-roll with the actual cartridge. Gotta get that good B-roll. We try a 2-player game with just the new Game Boys, and once we confirm for real that their link cable ports work, we put them back into the daisy chain. But 2 more attempts don't even get us back to 13 again.
But we did this before.
Yeah. We already got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're still just chasing shadows here. No idea what's making things work or not work, or why things that used to work no longer work. But we feel strongly that the power or the batteries are a major issue here.
So really the way we would figure this out is if we had a limit, we could measure which of these had the lowest power.
Or theoretically, just swap out all batteries. But we don't have we need a big brick of batteries.
That was a fresh pack of batteries. Also, we've been doing this for 2 days with a lot of ons and offs, which those.
And here it is. The last frame of footage we shot that weekend. This is 2 hours of setup and testing on Saturday and 5 more hours of testing on Sunday. We felt confident that through brute force, with the process of elimination, getting extremely nuanced with the systems and the chords, using everything we had at our disposal at the time, a solution would present itself, or at least a common problem would appear. It's in the game. How could it be this difficult? It's there, right? We finished the weekend with 13 players in a completed match, 14 players into a match, and 15 players crashing just before the start of a match. I just wanted to see the number 16. I'd given up on an actual 16-player game. Trust me, we tried everything we could think of. But by this point, the convention had been closed and over for about an hour. It was finally time to pack it in. But despite the exhaustion, we were still committed to keeping this project going. We'd gotten too close. And as luck would have it, Zari was also from Washington. Bob was still located halfway across the country in the Midwest, but 2/3 of the team would be near each other. We packed up the games and the cameras and we all went out to dinner together. And I feel like I'd really made friends with Zari and Bob. In fact, by the time we finished dinner, it was really late in the evening, and Zari never intended to stay in Portland this long. She was anxious about making the long drive back home in the dead of night. But Grace and I had booked our Airbnb through Monday, and the living room nook had a fold-out couch. I told her, well, you've only known us for about 24 hours, but if you're okay with sleeping around a collection of Pez dispensers, you're welcome to crash with us. And she did. And you might say, whoa, stranger danger, but few things bond people like hours and hours in the trenches testing Faceball multiplayer. Tuesday morning, while still in the air flying back home, Bob opened a Discord group for Faceball. Zari had already started tinkering away. This group was not just for me, Bob, and Zari. Bob was able to get in touch with Don Komarechka, an accomplished photographer, podcaster, and Faceball 2000 superfan who once ran a Faceball 2000 fan site, as well as Alexander Barr, an actual working engineer who builds underwater robots, but in his spare time made the fabled Double Octopus, the custom 16-player adapter, the same one donated to Jeremy Parrish. If you think it odd for someone like Alex to make such a thing, he is also responsible for the BitBoy, an SD card port for your Game Boy camera. Have you ever wanted to take 2 gigs worth of photos with your Game Boy camera? Well, get yourself the BitBoy, now in atomic purple. I also feel obligated to inform you that no, this is not the BitBoy NFT, this is instead something of actual use to society. Don and Alex are the type of people you want in your corner if you are trying to achieve the first 16-player game of Faceball 2000. But it's a small world. Alex had apparently already met Bob in an email chain years prior in 2018, and a few other Faceball weirdos filled out our little group, and this project is back up and running. But despite post-Portland enthusiasm, the project doesn't really move beyond brainstorming and little experiments. We all keep in touch in the Discord, but life happens and the project is basically dead by New Year's. In the spring, both my dogs and my mom have some serious health scares. I actually logged and synced the Portland retro footage in Alaska while visiting my parents for a month. I went to my first EVO, the fighting game tournament. Justin Wong gave me COVID. Bob was busy with some house remodeling and his day job. Zari became a genuine friend. Actually, the morning of the first time we were going to hang out, my apartment partially flooded. I recorded the audio and edited a chunk of a different video displaced from our apartment in a hotel. But after that, we watched the entire Back to the Future trilogy together. We went to see The Room in theaters. Massive layoffs hit the tech industry in 2023, and Zari unfortunately found herself unemployed over the summer. And I would later test positive for black mold and a few other types of mold. We're getting ready to move as I film this. Yay! But back in 2023, things start moving again in the summer. Bob ships Zari the whole kit, all the games, systems, cables, all of it, so she can do her electronic wizardry and we can keep testing. We try 16 of those white third-party cables, with the logic being that since they're all brand new, they'll be more reliable than secondhand 20-year-old cables. This turns out to be a complete bust. And since we're using all Game Boy colors, batteries are becoming an issue. That is 32 AA batteries in total. Power cables are ordered as more logistical issue, but power and voltage could potentially be a problem as well. Either way, power cables don't get us any further. The time and money investment is starting to get out of hand for how little progress we've made. In the back of my head, I'm thinking that somehow corralling 16 GameCubes and 16 GBA players would be the dream solution. And I have enough friends in the area, I could make some calls and possibly make that happen. But soon Alex shares with Zari the specs for his 16-player adapter, and Zari says that making one of her own wouldn't be a problem, she'd just need to order some parts. So yeah, for most of 2023 the project was basically dead until it suddenly wasn't. Fall 2023, Zari starts ordering the parts needed to build her own 16-player adapter. By November, all the parts were in and work begins. Because she's a damn wizard with this stuff, it doesn't take long to build, and so testing finally resumes, but this time with Alex's custom adapter, with our hands. Finally on this fabled device, we find that again the ceiling is 8 players. Getting above 8 players is possible, getting above 8 players consistently was not. However, with the adapter, we've eliminated 2 variables, cables and connection ports. This was all new, tested hardware, so the problem had to be something else. Right? This leads Zari to a hunch about a timing issue, and no, not as in turning all the systems on at the same time like I thought until I was politely told. No, she means the clock signal, the metronome signal between the end of each connection, which has to do with something she briefly considered when she joined us way back in Portland. Voltage. With her oscilloscope, and yes, she just had an oscilloscope lying around, she found that the low pulse value, indicated by the min value here on the pictures, increases as more and more systems are added to the daisy chain of link cables. At 9 systems, this low pulse value gets too high. This is why the ceiling seems to be 8. But then why were we able to occasionally get higher than 8? Probably because the batteries in the systems were getting weaker. Swapping in fresh batteries or fully charged GBA SPs was probably making things worse by increasing the voltage. For example, our 13-player game was late in the second day of testing. The batteries were running low.
I just kind of thought of a concern. How fresh?
And we happened to not be using the GameCube GBA player that of course runs off of an outlet. It was luck. The voltage by chance cleared the limbo bar and we played a full game. but we were never able to recreate it. This is why the power cables for all the Game Boy Colors actually wasn't helping at all, and my crazy idea of 16 GameCube GBA players would actually never work. But okay, we've identified a problem. Then what's the solution to this voltage issue? This is luckily an easy fix that works like a charm. With a buffer added to the device, bam, we are back up and running in no time. And this is when another discovery was made. The first map on Arena Select, Tiny, does not have 16 spawn points, only 13. Even though it's 4x4 and with only one block walled off, it should at least be 15, but this would explain why 14 players crashed immediately at the start of the match and 15 never even got into the match. There are 15 friggin' maps to choose from, some going as high as 10x10, and I cannot tell you why we never thought to just try a different stage. We were just so focused on the systems and the cords and the connections and the batteries and which Game Boys to use. We never thought there might be a software issue. The problem might be the damn map. But okay, with this voltage issue fixed and this map issue noted, 16 was still not working. 15 is now the new ceiling. It wasn't electrical as far as we could tell, as installing another buffer on the device didn't make the difference. So, oh god, alright, well what the hell then? We're 15. We are so close. But there's something odd about 15. It's stable. Shockingly stable. Outside of choosing the tiny arena, at this point, 15 is absolutely no problem. But then with 16 players, it crashes well before you even get to the arena selection screen. Something is not adding up here. And this is when the bomb finally drops. On a hunch, Zari started messing around in emulation with the ROM of Faceball 2000, and she makes an incredible discovery. Zari then attempts to mod the ROM, correcting a tiny error, and on the 16th of November 2023 at 2 a.m. Pacific, for the first time ever, the number 16 appeared on the menu of Faceball 2000. There it was, 16. But what this means is, it would appear that Faceball 2000 is actually a 15-player game. Holy shit, we did it. We did it! But there was an error in the code of a commercial game, one of its flagship features. Why would they advertise something that doesn't actually work? It's right there on the box, right? I mean, this is the box, right? And no, this isn't the box. This is a picture of the cover art. This is not a physical thing. But if what Zari found is true, why is there so much out there about the 16-player mode, but no one's saying actually it's only a 15-player mode? And that got me thinking. Is the 16-player mode an officially featured thing in Faceball 2000? Everybody who knows about this game knows about the 16-player mode. But was that ever an officially announced feature of this game? So at first I ran over to eBay to see if I could find a physical box or physical manual of the original game that said 16 players. Not a JPEG of the cover art, the actual box or manual. And nothing. Every one said 1 to 4 players. And so what the hell is this? Well, this is a fake. It's a Photoshop. It comes from thecoverproject.net, a site that boasts that it is confident that these are the highest quality covers found anywhere on the net. This doctored cover was commissioned by user Arsene on February 4th, 2011 and completed on April 18th, 2011. And this image found its way among the official cover art and thus onto so many videos and articles. Just a scan of Faceball 2000 Game Boy on YouTube shows several videos that use this doctored 16-player cover in their thumbnail. Even the Retronauts used it in their 2018 blog post. Now, in total fairness, we didn't put it in our thumbnail, but we did put it in our video thinking that it was the real cover art. Google searching Faceball 2000 Game Boy box or Faceball 2000 Game Boy cover, it's there 3 times before you even scroll.
Maybe that's bullshit. But it's on the box. They printed it. There's ink and paper that says 16 player. You can't just print that.
So credit where credit is due, thecoverproject.net. Your fake but high quality cover blended in with the real one, which I guess is the ultimate compliment, right? But this maybe helped spread awareness of the 16 player. It didn't start there. The user who commissioned this, Arsene, must have known about this from someplace else. And this is when it hits me. I don't know where knowledge of the 16-player mode in Faceball 2000 originated. Where did this knowledge come from? how did this myth, this rumor, even start? I checked every contemporary review and advertisement I could find, and any mention of multiplayer states up to 4 players. And Faceball 2000 got a decent bit of press. It was the poster game for an issue of Nintendo Power. There was even a $5 rebate to buy your friend a copy. The multiplayer was a big selling point for this game. But you mean to tell me they suddenly got modest when it came to the 16-player mode? That's something you would brag about, or somebody who's reviewing the game would probably bring that up. Maybe Nintendo forbade them from bringing it up at all, or maybe Nintendo didn't even know it existed, but at any rate, it would appear at launch, knowledge of the 16-player mode in Faceball 2000 did not exist. So where and when did it come from? There's a 16-year-old comment left on a 17-year-old YouTube video where producer David Nolte claims that it was originally designed for 16 players. Ah, and here's a guy talking about a 16-player adapter 4 years ago. And the name checks out. There was indeed a producer, David Doc Nolte, in the credits. Now, this video was uploaded 17 years ago in 2007, and this comment from David was made 16 years ago, probably in 2008. So is this comment the source? Well, 23,000 views in 17 years ain't nothing, but it might go further than that. Research Faceball 2000 long enough and you'll start seeing people talk about something interesting. 16-player debuted at a museum. At first, I didn't think this was true at all, but it popped up enough times from enough people that there had to have been some truth behind it. Bulletproof Software at the time was located in Redmond, Washington, which is several miles from Seattle, but still considered part of the greater Seattle area, which is important because a lot of these claims say that the 16-player multiplayer happened at PacSci, the Pacific Science Center here in Seattle. When we first started this whole thing, Bob reached out to the faculty at PacSci and came up empty. But as more people insisted, no, they played Faceball 2000, 16 players at PacSci as a kid, we went and poked around again. And that's when we found it. As I was finishing this video, we finally got confirmation that yes, Faceball 2000 for the Game Boy was at a museum, part of a maze exhibit that was around for the summer of 1992 and traveled all around the world. The staff provided us with pictures and even specs for the exhibit, and we can confirm it was 4 players. The exhibits were really impressive though. The systems were in custom cases with monitors, which was mind-blowing at the time. I would have been 8 at the time. It would have been mind-blowing to go to a museum and see video games. Like, museums teach you things, video games rot your brain, right? Any kid my age who went to a museum and saw Faceball, saw a video game, would remember that. But we've got museum staff emails, press pictures, official exhibit documents stating 4 players, and then we got Trust Me Bro stating it was 16 players. Sorry. Memory is a fuzzy thing. I'm not trying to shit on anyone's childhood here. Unless you're an adult and you still think that TMNT on the NES is a legitimately good game. Sorry, you gotta grow up and face reality on that one. But if not for these people with these memories and talking about this stuff online, we wouldn't have been motivated to research this obscure detail about this game. But I say with confidence that no, Faceball 2000 did not debut its 16-player mode in a museum. It did not use the 16-player adapter prototype that Bulletproof Software made, nor did they make one themselves. Sorry. But okay, if it wasn't on the box, not in any of the press, didn't debut at a museum, where the hell did this come from? Well, there are 2 Guinness World Records attributed to Faceball 2000. When did those happen? Okay, this first one here says 1991. Okay, that's it? All right, fine. What about the other one? January 1st, 1 AD. Case closed. Thanks, Guinness. Ugh, damn it. How did the world learn about 16-player Faceball? Well, near as I can tell, the source of this information comes from a January 11, 2005 interview with lead programmer Robert Champagne. This predates David's YouTube comment by maybe 3 years. In the interview, he claims that he left the 16-player code in the game despite being told to just make it workable with 4 players. This actually explains something interesting that I haven't really talked about yet. On the menu, it will tell you how many people are connected, but if you use the 4-player adapter, icons for 2, 3, or 4 players will appear on the title screen. But no fancy numbers when daisy-chaining GBA cables. What's up with that? That is because there are 2 different, separate multiplayer modes coded into Faceball 2000. As per Nintendo's request, Robert added new code to work with their 4-player adapter. But This does not mean he removed his 16-player code. In fact, it was just sitting there like a sleeper agent waiting to be awoken. Really makes you wonder how many games have extra stuff just hidden in the code waiting to be discovered. But back to the interview, Robert's answer comes from the interviewer stating, "It has been observed that the game can handle up to 16 players." And alright, well, how the hell did he know to ask that question? God, if only I could hunt that guy down and ask him. Turns out, our little Discord community has Don as a member. So, I asked him. But this interview is nearly 20 years old. He doesn't remember. And he says he doesn't have access to those old emails anymore. But he was also the guy responding to David on YouTube about the 16-player adapter. Seriously, this community is like just us. But the man he interviewed, Robert Champagne, still enjoys talking about Faceball 2000 and was happy to answer questions from our little community. He claims that he was still proud of Faceball, as well he should be, and had bragged to anyone who'd listen that he programmed 16 players behind Nintendo's back. And at the time of the interview, he worked for Nintendo. But what I think this means is the call was coming from inside the house. Robert spent a decade plus bragging about his renegade programming, and again, wouldn't you? As the 90s rolled on and Doom LAN parties, GoldenEye split screen, and then online PC gaming exploded, who wouldn't occasionally be like, yeah, I made 16-player deathmatch in 1991 behind Nintendo's back
with a box of scraps?
It doesn't seem far-fetched that this wild claim eventually got out among niche gaming circles online and found its way to Don, who then asked the man himself, who put it on the record, "Yes, I am Iron Man." From this interview to the Photoshop cover art 6 years later, somewhere along that line, it just became common knowledge and fact. Bob himself admitted that this interview is what inspired him to attempt it himself all the way back in 2008, and what inspired Alex to make that custom 16-player adapter many years later. This interview is where it all started, at least Faceball 2000's resurgence, but it all came from here. Maybe there was forum or email discussion that's been lost forever, but whatever discussion happened on a forum or in an email chain, it led to this interview, which is where this obscure, ambitious little Game Boy game ascended to something legendary. 16-player Faceball was just sitting there waiting to be discovered for over a decade, and it would appear that not too long after it was discovered, the man himself was more than happy to put it on the record. I personally have no memory of when I learned of this. Somewhere over the years I must have read about it or someone told me about it, and I just took it as fact. Except if you read the interview, he never actually tested 16 players, because they couldn't find enough people. I mean, also not to mention, this was 1991. 16 Game Boys in 1991 was not cheap, and I doubt Nintendo would lend out 16 dev units to one team because, hey, I want to try a thing real quick. By the way, speaking of 1991, here is a real picture of Kurt Cobain with his Game Boy. I was trying to find a contemporary picture of the Game Boy, so I just googled Kurt Cobain Game Boy, and this immediately popped up. Also, here's Dave Grohl playing Game Boy, and is that Kurt's Game Boy in the studio when they were recording in utero? I don't know, this video has had me look up so much stuff, I just thought I'd share this with you. But anyway, even the devs themselves did not test 16 players, but because Robert claimed that it's in the code, the world just ran with it without any real tangible proof. And like, yeah, why wouldn't they? This is coming from the lead programmer. This is the guy. But no one had the ability to test this because of the incredible commitment to such a stupid game mode. And you know what? He's not lying. He is telling the truth. As far as he knows. Because actually, he's not telling the truth. The truth is, and you've watched this far into the video, I'm sure you finally want to know what it is. The truth is, because of an error in the code, because player 1 was assigned a value of 1 and not 0, it was mistakenly coded for 15 players max. A 16th player will crash the game. Coding is weird, I don't know, but 16 players would have a value of 0 to 15. Or because it's hexadecimal, 0 to F, because 10 through 15 are represented with letters, not numbers. But the important thing is that player 1 should have been assigned to 0 with 15 slots ahead of it. But since player 1 was mistakenly assigned to 1 and not 0, there are only 14 slots ahead of player 1, thus a total of 15 player slots. This is why when Bob tested all the stuff before Portland Retro in 2022, he only got to 15. This is why At Our Best, actually in Portland, was only 15. In fact, I'm convinced that this odd moment here that happened on our second day of testing was us winning the lottery with the voltage.
What?
That was odd.
And yours said 14?
I thought that said 14.
That said 15.
It said player 14, but 15 players.
Yeah.
Okay, so widescreen.
So that's interesting.
All 15 systems shook hands and were ready to fight, except that we chose a stage that was too small, without enough spawn points. If we had just picked a different stage, I am confident we would have gotten 15 players all the way into a game. No telling that it wouldn't have crashed like 3 seconds later, but still. It also means that we actually did everything we could that weekend. Up until now, I looked at that weekend as pretty much a failure, but knowing what I know now, nah man, those hours and hours were just shy of what was actually possible. This whole time, Robert was bragging about something he actually didn't do. He was literally one value off. It's an easy mistake to make, and I'm not trying to insult Robert or say he has anything to apologize for. It's just how it happened. Robert never caught this mistake because he was never able to actually test it, and it didn't need to be tested since this was never going to be an official feature for the game. Nintendo only cared if it was good for 4 players, which it was, so it was good and sent off to stores. This is why I say with confidence, it did not happen in a museum exhibit circa 1992, and we made the first 16-player game because the commercial version of Faceball 2000 for the Game Boy actually only goes to 15 players. It is not a 16-player game. It was meant to be 16 players, but the facts are it is not. Hey, it's Derek from the future. It is January 2025 and I have not even unpacked my office yet, but there I was, working on what I thought was the end of the video when I got an ominous text from Zari. Derek, I fucking found it. Now at first I thought she was actually talking about a user review on GameFAQs.com from August 2000 that mentioned 16-player mode, which was the earliest mention of 16 players we had found. It is until we actually found it. April 1991, Nintendo Power, Volume 23, the one with Power Blade and Scat on the cover. Page 69, the Game Boy Special feature, coming soon. Faceball 2000, which will work with the 4-player adapter, and a new adapter which will allow up to 16 players. Right here, from Nintendo Power no less, this might be the earliest published mention of 16 players Faceball ever. But it is still really, really odd that months later when Faceball actually released, there was no mention of this, almost like this was a mistake? Stranger still, we discovered a whole other mystery. Okay, so to recap, Faceball 2000 released December 1991, and this little blurb from Nintendo Power was April 1991. But in January 1991, there was the Winter Show of CES in Las Vegas, the Consumer Electronics Show. Before there was E3, CES was like the big video game show in North America. And I managed to find a very brief bit of footage of Faceball at this event because the Game Boy 4-player adapter was one of Nintendo's big things that year. But what I have not been able to find is any evidence of a supposed 10-player adapter that was allegedly shown at this event. Yes, 10 players. We have found several mentions of a 10-player adapter. Game Players Volume 3, Issue Number 4, April 1991, page 30. Bulletproof showed us a prototype adapter that allows at least 10 Game Boys to be hooked together. And then there was Video Game Computer Entertainment Issue 34, November 1991, page 83. When Faceball 2000 was first shown at the Winter CES in January 1991, Bulletproof was showing off the game's network capabilities. The demo centered around a custom cable that the company was hoping to pack in with each Faceball 2000 box. This cable allowed up to 10 players to compete simultaneously with little or no effect on the processing speed. And then finally, a Usenet post posted January 16th, 1991, literally days after the show, where a Dave Taylor said, "Did I mention the Maze 2000 Game Boy game? It'll support, quote, at least 10 players, according to the developer." But then, this write-up from CES's Summer 1991 show in Chicago, it was suddenly a 4-player game. Best Game Boy cartridge, Faceball 2000 Bulletproof, is a game of high-tech tag that allows you to compete against up to 3 other players. So it would appear that at launch, yeah, no one was talking about 16 players. But months earlier, only Nintendo was talking about 16 players because everyone else was talking about 10 players. So crap, man, like, this changes everything. Or does it? Because Outside of these claims, I have seen absolutely no evidence of any of this, and up until now I didn't even know that this existed. Bob was able to get in touch with one of the authors of the Game Players article, though unsurprisingly he has no memory of this 30 years later. And then we put it to the man himself, Robert Champagne, and he has no memory of this, and really just put it best: don't believe everything that you read.
They printed it. There's ink and paper that says 16 player. You can't just print that.
But Robert does say that he recalls saying the most we ever tested with is 10 people. And if you go back to his interview with Don, he says that 10 players was the most he ever tested. Not to mention 10 is when you start running into issues with the voltage. What I think happened was, again, Robert was bragging about his game, bragging about the multiplayer, and he mentioned offhand, yeah, we got 10 working. And I think that somehow morphed into, yeah, we're showing up the 4-player thing right now, but back at the office we got 10. Because the 4-player adapter was being unveiled at this event, because it was brand new tech, perhaps some miscommunication or some, overly boastful claims. There was some confusion with the press, and we've done this with 10 became, we're going to ship this with 10. Yeah, but then the little blurb in Nintendo Power. Yeah, I don't know, like, if you write a 0 really quickly, it looks like a 6. And so maybe somebody wrote down 10, but through another layer of this telephone game of miscommunication, someone else accidentally typed 16, which just happened to be like correct, like accidentally. I don't know. At least at this moment, I do not know. But I still stand firm that it was Robert's interview in 2005 with Don is where knowledge of 16-player Faceball became more broadly known and is when things really kicked off this game's re-evaluation. But you want to know what's even worse? Actually, proof of 16 players has been there all along. Nintendo Power, Volume 30, Faceball 2000's big multi-page spread. Down in the corner of page 63, this little screenshot. This is the team play screen where everyone can choose their teams by choosing one of 4 different style faces. And count those lines. I have counted them. 16 lines. 16 lines for 16 slots for 16 players. But what is odd is the screen is only accessible unless you have other systems connected, and it doesn't quite look like the commercial game, so maybe it's from a prototype game. Like, here's what the shipped version of Faceball 2000 looks like. I can't really explain the screen, but it would appear that, yeah, the proof was right there in Nintendo Power, I guess technically twice. But I need to finish this video now, so I'm gonna get back to it. This has been Derek from the future. Let's get back to this now. But now back to our 16-player breakthrough. Zari had only fixed this error in emulation, and this was just the menu. We need this on hardware, tangible hardware. So Bob then suggests, all right, 16 flashcards? Because we need to get this modded version of the game onto a cart. Zari had the gear to flash her own carts because of course she did. So we didn't need to get the more expensive flash carts with SD cards. And since we needed a lot of them, I think Bob was able to get them at a discount. The purchase was made and sent to be delivered to Zari. And, well, 11 days later, on the 27th of November 2023 at approximately 4:30 Pacific time, with 16 flash carts loaded with the patched ROM that fixed the error in the code, connected to the 16-player adapter built from the specs provided by Alex that was modified to account for the voltage issue, and choosing a level with enough spawn points, the first ever 16-player game of Faceball 2000 was achieved on real hardware.
First ever 16-player Faceball match. Because there existed a bug in the code that meant 16 could never work before, but we got 16 flash carts going here. And look, there's number 16.
All those people said it couldn't be done.
1 year, 1 month, 12 days since meeting Bob in person and meeting Zari for the first time, and exhausting every angle the three of us could think of in Portland. It finally happened. And to be honest, it all happened so fast, and said he wondered why it took us so long. It was kind of anticlimactic. I mean, after our weekend in Portland 2022, and then for most of 2023, this project was kind of just dead in the water. And then we hit a major tailwind and suddenly it was over. But also, I think I gotta come clean. Where was I in all of this? Well, while Zari and Bob are making history, I was at my in-laws for Thanksgiving, sitting in front of their chicken coop, talking about the longest video game passwords ever for a video that went on Patreon.
Yes. I told you, I'm coming live from the chicken coop.
I remember looking at my phone and seeing the Discord notifications and just thinking like, oh my god, they did it. I mean, in the video I'll say we, but really it was just Bob and Zari. But to be fair though, we have solved this very specific issue. This does not solve the issue of Game Boy systems and different types of cables. It doesn't seem to be a factor, but we're not sure if mixing different Game Boy systems and different cords doesn't create any unseen issues. Also, experimenting with this fix in the code opened up a big issue here. Can this game go higher than 16? The biggest multiplayer map is 10 by 10, and spawn points seem to be any square not totally boxed in. Is it possible to get 100 Game Boys linked together? Unfortunately, modification of this magnitude would require something far, far more important: the source code. Zari was able to make her mod directly to the binary, which compared to having the source code, it's kind of like eating a meal you think tastes off and then shoving your hands into the plate to try and make it into a meal you want it to be. It's very messy and would be so much easier if you just had the cookbook and ingredients. We've actually looked into this, and unfortunately, the source code is still owned by Bulletproof Software, or as they are now known today, the Tetris Company. I mean, I don't know what they truly stand to lose by releasing the source code for a game like this, but if anyone has fuck you money, it is the people that own Tetris. As far as we know, the source code for Faceball 2000 is locked in a vault somewhere in Hawaii. As for hacking Faceball 2000 further, this is where we leave it for anyone else who wants to dig deeper and keep going with this project, because we have something else far more important. It's time for us to have an official test. At this point, it's late November, so we agreed that after New Year's, Bob would fly up and we'd all meet in Seattle. And so, January 13th, 2024, Seattle, Washington, inside the world-famous Pink Gorilla Import and Retro Store at approximately 9:15 Pacific, the world's first 16-player game of Faceball 2000 for the Game Boy concluded. My friend Jacob won the match. I'm not jealous. Believe it or not, I was actually able to invite most everyone who was with us in Portland to that event. And dude even wore his Stop Skeletons shirt again, which was pretty cool, man. But it was meaningful for me to have those people there back, because I felt like I owed them, after the hours and hours I put them through, at least the chance to finally play this. But here is the craziest thing. Here's an even crazier thing than all of that. We had some very special guests with us that night. Lead programmer and the man himself, Robert Champagne, was there.
I guess got that 16-player game running right now.
Oh, wow.
Hell yeah.
Well, that was easy.
As well as lead programmer of the original MIDI Maze, Michael Park. Both were still in the Seattle area, and Bob was able to get a hold of them. So not only did we achieve this first full game of 16-player Faceball, we did it with two of the men responsible for these games existing in the first place. Robert apparently told Zari, hey, thanks for fixing my code. I was able to briefly chat with the two of them, even though Michael said,
I don't remember very much about that code.
I first asked him about making the original MIDI Maze.
It seemed like a good idea at the time. There was a nice confluence because the ST had this MIDI port built in, so that made an easy network. And I was kind of interested in the graphic challenge of doing the 3D aspect of the maze.
And of course I had to ask if he had ever played 16-player MIDI Maze.
So do you have any good memories of getting 16-player with you and your chums, like in the lab?
I don't remember getting up to 16, but
really?
we got, I don't remember how many we ever actually got together.
And not only has Michael never played 16-player of his own game, he's also not sure it's ever been done.
It'd be interesting to know if anyone actually managed to do it.
So then, sir, what you're saying then is that 16-player mini maze on the Atari ST has not been documented yet, and that someone out there can get 16 players together, and your phone number and address is what, sir?
But I did later find this small article from the Michigan Atari magazine in October 1987, where they hosted 12 people at a 5-player MIDI Maze fun night. With plans to meet again a few months later, maybe some maniacs in Michigan made it happen in the late 80s.
True then, like that's one more thing that perhaps has not been documented.
Yeah.
That is one more summit for people to perhaps climb.
Yeah, although, you can probably find better things to do with your time.
We could, but if we can't, then there's always that, correct?
And unfortunately, I didn't have the chance to ask him about this random occurrence that you've maybe seen online. Next, I had a chance to have a face-to-face talk with Faceball's main programmer, Robert Champagne.
I guess, in short, this is all your fault.
It is all my fault.
Yeah.
30 years later.
I guess, how does it feel to...
Well, it's really crazy because we had a lot of fun developing. I have a lot of stories, way more than I can even share here.
I got time, so...
And since I had him, I definitely had to ask if he had ever seen 16 players running.
Definitely not documented, because when we originally had the game published with Nintendo, we had taken the 16-player version to them. And this is actually before the 4-player adapter was available. And for whatever reason, Nintendo decided they didn't want to do that, and that's okay. The way that the 4-player adapter worked, and the way that using just the 2-player, just head-to-head worked, was all in line with the original 16-player code. So the 16-player code was just kind of left out.
I also had the chance to clear up some things with Faceball 2000 and its connection to MIDI Maze.
It really was left over from MIDI Maze. It was just...
No, the Game Boy version was completely rewritten.
Okay.
Yeah, Robert said original 16-player code, and I assumed he meant originally from MIDI Maze, which is not true.
He and I talked, I remember he shared some stories about, hey, this was a problem, and I was like, okay, so I'll make sure I alleviate that. Mike never saw this, but Jim Yee, the president of the company that developed it, said that the bugs I had in the Game Boy version were the same bugs that Mike had in the original Atari ST version. It wasn't because I copied the code, it was just because the approach that we had was the same. Well, we ended up writing the same code.
Yeah, so while it's true that Faceball is MIDI Maze brought to the Game Boy, it was still completely rewritten from the ground up.
The idea for the 16-player then, so that was because it was in MIDI Maze, or was that just... You both came to that conclusion just sometime on your own.
I said, there's no reason we couldn't have some kind of a serial connector that just would daisy chain all the Game Boys together.
Yeah.
And somebody said, let's try it. Let's see what happens. And we were able to get 4 players pretty quickly. And there was no reason technically it couldn't do more. So it was just, hey, we can support 16 players. This is awesome. It wasn't that there was anything wrong with just 2-player Game Boy. It was just, why do 2 when you can do 16?
Yeah. And that's kind of the great thing about the game is that it's so rudimentary that you have that ability to, really push itself. And even, seeing the 16-player, it ran, no disrespect, much better than I thought it was going to.
I agree.
And
he also talked briefly about the Super Nintendo version.
I did the SNES version. The SNES version was imported directly from the Game Boy.
Okay.
With upgraded graphics.
Because that's 2-player split screen.
Yeah.
But there's no 16-player code left in there.
He also talked about how he made this port in only a few months.
Because the Super Nintendo was a different CPU, I manually took that code and fixed the bugs and stuff as I ported it to SNES. But it wasn't the original game. Okay. It was just using the same operations. Because we had 3 months to do this.
I wish I would have asked him a little bit more about the split screen mode. But Faceball's legacy as one of the original multiplayer deathmatch games.
Doom gets so much credit for deathmatch and LAN and all that. Of course, it's not who did it first, it's who did it bigger and better.
Carmack wins that. Sorry. Carmack definitely had a better idea.
And you work at Meta. Did you talk to him at Meta about that at all?
I never had a chance to meet him at Meta or otherwise.
Yes, there was a time when both Doom programmer John Carmack and Faceball programmer Robert Champagne were working at Facebook, aka Meta. But they never talked shop about being pioneers in first-person shooters.
Again, I don't think we did first-person shooters because we thought this is a great thing to do. It was just more of a, this is fun, this is unique, it's fun to run around the maze and shoot your friends and say have a nice day. So at the time we weren't thinking, this is going to be history. I certainly wasn't thinking 30 years later we're going to be sitting in a room in Seattle playing 16 players.
Yeah.
But it was just...
Sorry.
No, it's great.
Okay, and what about the future of Faceball?
When is Faceball 3000 coming out?
That's a question for Henk.
Because
Henk owns the rights to Faceball. So
I'm just saying, last year there was the Quake 2 HD port that came out. And that has 8-player split screen on it. So there's still hunger and necessity for this. Why can't we get 8 switches with 8 split screens and 64-player?
I'd like to see today we could do VR Faceball.
Yeah.
orders of magnitude more interesting than the original game.
We don't need a Resident Evil 4 VR. No, we need Faceball. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, sir. This is all your fault.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for being here. Yeah.
So that was a full test, but it was a private one. It's time to take this baby on the road and have a public test. It was decided that the next best place for Face was the Midwest Gaming Classic in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Zare and I would have to fly, but Bob could drive this time. And we gotta give it to Dan from Midwest Gaming Classic for getting us in there. The event was held April 5th and 6th, and this was late January when we reached out to them, so just over like 2 months away, but he was absolutely down. Again, the drawing power of a 16-player Game Boy game cannot be disputed. He worked with his team to fit us in and even got us in on the website like right at the last minute. But we had a problem. We still needed a lot of gear. Bob wanted to go big, and he had been scheming the cheapest way to get 16 GameCubes and 16 GBA players since the moment we cracked this whole thing. We had an event that was willing to have us, but we were still missing a ton of gear. But Dan was able to get us the systems and GBA players that we needed, not to mention 16 third-party controllers that looked like Super Nintendo controllers. Of course, and the TVs, they would provide all of the TVs for us. But while this is all going on, I was fighting like a super serious sinus infection. Actually, before the test at Pink Gorilla, I was super sick. But I was not going to miss it. Then after some antibiotics, it came back with a vengeance in March. But I was not going to miss this either. April 2nd is my birthday, and 2024 is when I turned 40 years old. So, as a newly minted 40-year-old man with chronic sinusitis, I boarded a plane to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Anyone who saw me there that weekend saw me coughing my ass off, no doubt. But the thrill of finally showing this, the first public showing ever, that adrenaline will push you through anything. And don't worry, chronic sinusitis isn't contagious. And also, yeah, this video took a long ass time to make, but I was still shooting stuff in 2024. When I get there, Zari is already working on some further improvements to the game, like removing smaller stages that can't handle 16. The reaction from people is mixed. Anyone who walked by would pause and do a double take, and it was amazing watching people's brains process what the hell they were seeing. And I would say a third to half of all the people that walked by our little corner stopped to play or at least ask what in the world we were doing. And I would like to say that the whole thing was a slam dunk, but maybe it's a good thing that we were a late addition to the show and didn't get a ton of hype, because there were a ton of problems with the adapter.
We got 16-player Faceball here at the Midwest Gaming Classic 2024. How cool is this? Well, if it was working, it'd be cool. Right, exactly.
This was still Zari's first adapter built in November. It was really just a prototype that happened to work. It wasn't made for this. She and Alex were hoping to have another model for the show, but that just couldn't happen. And we had a ton of problems with this device. Zari had to do so much emergency surgery. It would break and then it would work, and then it would break and then it would work.
I need to do a dramatic reenactment of what just happened. So the team's been working to get this done. It was like, we did it! And I was like, cool. What did you fix? I don't know. But it's working now? Yeah! But why? Who knows? Shut up!
It got to the point where Zari was soldering stuff to the board.
Is this gonna be safe to do?
Yeah?
Okay.
And then we left the casing off, just like, don't touch it, don't breathe on it, it's working. Yes, it's naked, but don't touch it, it's working. Ugh. And because we had so many problems, we actually went the whole weekend without a full 16-player game. Everything was shut down, it was Sunday evening, and I was just like, hey guys, let's take this one on the chin. That's how it goes sometimes, but Zari suddenly gets a fire under her ass. We noticed that a lot of vendors and staff had broken things down and were just waiting for trucks to arrive to start packing. So Zari does a mad dash across the floor, running up to anyone nearby. And of course, it's not actually that difficult to get people interested in Faceball. I don't know who any of these people actually are. It all happened so damn fast. I did ask, is it cool? Hey, I'm filming you guys. Is that cool with everyone? I don't even know who those people are. I didn't have a chance to ask their names. It all happened so fast. But here it is, the first public game of Faceball 2000. But also, we did have some downtime. Bob and Zari thought of another stupid test to do. Did you know that there is more than one way to daisy chain a bunch of GameCubes together? And that is with the GBA controller port link cable. Because the GameCube GBA player lets you use a GBA as a controller. And in a Turtles all the way down situation, you can run that GBA controller port into another GameCube, into another GameCube, into another GameCube, and so on. What we achieved was unfortunately not the full 16, but we had one GBA running through 12 GameCube GBA players. That is Zari pushing buttons on a GBA micro. The signal is running through 12 GameCubes with virtually no lag.
This is more stable than 16 Faceballs connected together.
But wait, what about linking up? a GBA running through 12 GameCubes versus a GameCube GBA on a controller with virtually no lag added. And that's probably another world first. Add that to the board of stupid things we have achieved with this project. And that wraps up our first show on the road. Except I need to share a moment that happened with Dan, the big boss of the event, and this is 100% true. So it's Sunday evening and the show has closed. We were on the arcade side of the expo and vendors had started breaking down all their machines. We spot Dan making his way to the back. He is carrying a bottle of water and a half-eaten sandwich on white bread, like Wonder Bread. He's more shambling than walking. Honestly, he looks exhausted, as I'm sure anyone running an expo would be. We pull up on him and ask what we should do with the GameCubes and GBA players and controllers that he provided for us. Without missing a beat, he just goes, "You coming back next year?" And Bob goes, "Yeah." And he just goes, "Keep him." And walks away. Just bosses the fuck out, takes a bite of his sandwich, walks away. It's like, damn, that is like the most baller shit I had ever seen. And I think that was literally the last time we spoke that evening. I mean, no disrespect, he had much more important things to deal with, but like, that was a great cap to the weekend. That was that was pretty cool. But we did learn a lot that weekend. Zari modded the game a little more, so things like only player 1 can move around the menu. Alex and Zari has since made 2 new models, one with connection ports and one that will hopefully not need emergency surgery. Not only did we have a blast at Midwest Gaming, there was a feeling of like, well, we've shown it publicly, but what about showing it publicly and it working longer than it didn't? So we set our eyes on Portland Retro. We needed to bring this back to Portland. I got in touch with the Portland Retro people, and when I pitched it, the guy said, 16-player Game Boy deathmatch. That is so Portland, we have to do this. One problem though, they wanted to put us on a stage. The adapter we use at Midwest Gaming and the updated models that Alex and Zari have been cooking up, the cords are all short. They were made for a large round table, not a 60-foot wide stage. We go back and forth about just getting a few tables, but they seem adamant that this is logistically the best solution for them. Days before the convention, Zari thinks up a solution, an entirely new device.
Oh my god, it works. Why does it work? Why does this work? What the fuck?
Little box with 3 ports. 1 port to the previous box, 1 port to a system, and the last port to the next box. Simple. She makes 20. Literally, and I do mean that literally, she was 3D printing off the cases the night before we drove out. I don't know how she got any sleep, but they work almost without issue. We had 16-player games running pretty much the entire weekend. This is probably a close approximation of what they wanted to ship the game with. Because we were told we had to use a stage. We had to think of a solution, and Zari just did it. Almost exactly 2 years later, we went from struggling to get halfway while posted up in the corner to 16 players fully functioning on a stage with banners, 16 TVs, 16 systems, and only a handful of issues. And this was September again. I know this video took a really long time to make, but the story kept going. I could have finished this video 3 times because it spanned the entire of 2024. There were 3 endings I could have done with this video, okay? And also, you know what? One more piece of unfinished business. Here is Bob playing Faceball through 16 GameCubes. Guinness, call us. We got receipts. Let's make this official. Also, our testing was on a modded version of the game. For good measure, we also tried 15 players on the commercial release of Faceball, using Zari's daisy chain loop device. Here is the world's first 15-player game of unmodded commercial Faceball 2000. I finally won one, but you know me, I stay humble. And so here we are again. It is March 2025, and here again, I thought I was finished with this video. I mean, like, what else is there really to do? We'd researched far more than we should have for this game. We've modded and learned the intricacies of this game to a degree that no one ever should have. We've made multiple custom devices and taken them to 2 conventions in different chunks of the country. We have talked to the developers of this game and showed them what we have achieved. But there was always one white whale still in the background of all this. Bulletproof Software, the publisher and IP holder of Faceball. Namely, Henk Rogers, the founder and CEO of the company, which is of course now known as the Tetris Company. We have tried numerous times to reach out to Henk over the years we've been making this project. But as you can imagine, the man who owns Tetris is busy and has far more important things to do. But man, I gotta give it to Bob. He had a contact at the Tetris company that he emailed from time to time, and whenever he did, he would CC an email for Henk Rogers that he had gotten, just in case. Again, we've been working on this for years. Years. Bob didn't even know if this email for Henk even worked. So while I was shooting the Derek from the Future update, this happened. I am down doing a Zoom about Faceball. It's still the most accessible first-person shooter. Maybe it's time to bring it back for Switch. Well, you know what that means. Gotta scrap the ending of the video and make a new one. At this point, I have lost count how many times I have scrapped and redone the ending of this video, but I'm doing it one last time because I was able to sit down and chat with the founder and CEO of the Tetris company so that I could ask him about Faceball. It did take a little bit to actually land the interview, about a month and a half actually, and to be honest, I wasn't sure it was gonna happen, but then I got the all clear. To talk to some people from Tetris, I guess they had to vet me first. Can't trust them YouTubers, I totally understand. But they left me on, we'll get back to you. By then I had flown back to Alaska to be with family, but a week later, I got the email. Henk is free. The interview is on. I will spare you the personal details, but this was actually perfect timing for me. We get into the call, and ever the professional, Henk had to make sure his lighting was good. Oh, take your time. I've got nothing else going on.
You got nothing else going on? That sounds sad.
Oh, well, I do. The thing is, I have this project going on. But immediately, Henk is roasting me.
There you go.
All right, I gotta be on my A game. Hello, my name is Derek Alexander, and I have a channel called Stop Skeletons from Fighting. And I have been working on a Faceball documentary for, I guess, 2.5 years now.
Wow.
Ideally, this will be the cap to the documentary, to be speaking with you, and this will be a great, ending to it. And on the bucket list of things for this project, speaking with you was certainly on that, but we never really thought we'd get here. But man, this story has been crazy, and so I'm honored to be talking with you right now.
All right. Let's fire away.
Basically, sir, we have discussed the making of this game, but we've not discussed the publishing of this game, the release of this game. And so, what was the release of Faceball 2000 on the Game Boy? It's 1991. The Game Boy's been out for, just over 2 years. Wolfenstein 3D, it will come out in 6 months, I believe. What was it like to release that game in 1991?
You know what? So I was running the company in Japan. And I had somebody running the company in the US. So I wasn't that, how can I say, that directly involved in the publishing.
How did it feel when you had MIDI Maze and then you released Faceball, and then you watched Wolfenstein and Doom and Quake and Half-Life? I can't imagine how the 90s decade went as you had this great little game on the Game Boy, Super Nintendo, Game Gear, and so on. What did it feel like to watch FPS come?
My problem was that, I was a publisher and I published lots of different games. And so I couldn't focus just on one game and say, hey, what's going wrong with this one game, or what's going right, and, blah, blah, blah. We'd have to go on to another game if the game didn't work.
Were you at CES in Las Vegas, January 1991, and were you talking to the press about Faceball 2000?
I'm sure I was, and I actually have. You remember what was his name? What's his name? He wore baggy pants, and it was a very beginning, maybe hip hop. I don't know what you call it, but anyway.
MC Hammer, you mean?
MC Hammer. And
yeah.
We wore MC Hammer pants, the baggy pants. They were yellow pants with Faceballs all over them. And I remember we went clubbing and we were all wearing them, and the DJ is like, "Who are you guys?"
Sir, I beg of you, sir. Do you have pictures of these pants of you at the club with your Faceball?
Have them somewhere. I mean, I'd have to dig for those pictures because that's 1991.
Yep.
So definitely, I must have been interviewed and all that. So, what was it like? Yeah, I wore freaking baggy pants at CES. You know, I did. Oh, and we made little foam baseballs, like Nerf balls.
Oh, of course. But I don't know if there's photographic evidence of this.
And we gave them to, you know, like boxes of them to people, and they could throw it at each other. And baseballs, of course.
Yeah.
That was part of our marketing. I remember that too. Yeah.
By the way, this was scheduled for 30 minutes, and we talked for 90. And I was warned that Henk and I would probably wander off topic, and we did. But I needed to get to the bottom of these supposed 16 and 10 player adapters.
The question is, which came first, the hub or Faceball? Maybe it was at a time when we were still trying to get Nintendo to adopt our adapter rather than... Because the adapter, that little piece of hardware would be something that you just plug into the side of your Game Boy and then have two places to plug in a cable. That's it.
Yeah, it was, and the way that Robert tells it, and again, getting the timeline of all this is so much more difficult 30 years later, but Robert says that you or David Nolte or whoever went to Nintendo and said, hey, by the way, we can do 16. And that was before they had made the 4-player adapter. Perhaps Nintendo Japan was busy making it.
Because I was trying to convince Nintendo to adopt ours instead of, in a previous, like in the late 80s, I sold 2 million joypads to Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
We created a new kind of joypad. It was called BPS Max in Japan, and it was called NES Max in the US.
Yes.
Basically, I was selling like 100,000 a month, and then finally, Arakawa and I would negotiate on a monthly basis, trying to get the price down. And finally, I said, "Look, you want to get the price down? Order 1 million, and I'll give you I'll get you the best price." And he did. So we ended up making altogether 2 million joypads. So I had a relationship with them of making hardware and selling it to Nintendo. I could have made that hardware. I could have made that little, it would have been dog-ass simple. It's like it's like a USB with 2 plugs on one side, that kind of thing. The hub was such a dumb idea because it basically stole cycles from every Game Boy. It would send out a signal saying, give me data, give me data, give me data. And so this unmaskable interrupt that was coming from the hub that would interrupt the game and slow it down to a crawl. You get into like, how often do you want to get information or send information? And the answer is as little as possible. Because each time you get information or send information, now you're doing something else besides moving things on the screen. That should be your highest priority, and communicating to the other Game Boys should be something that happens in between, and as little as possible. Mm-hmm. In a daisy chain, basically, you send a signal to the Game Boy on the left, and it goes around the ring, and then eventually the Game Boy on the right gives you information about all of the others, the status of all the other Game Boys. So all we had to do was make a cable that had a plug-in for another cable, and the data could only come in one way and only go out the other direction. So that was the hardware that we created, and we showed it to Nintendo, and everybody could just carry that cable. Could still be used. No, I think it was an adapter. It was an adapter, so that all you needed was a little adapter, so that you'd have the ability to connect 2 cables to one Game Boy. Anyway, that's how we came up with the daisy chain concept.
So this confirms it. There was never a 16-player adapter, much less a 10-player one. There was only a device pitched to Nintendo that, from Henk's description, sounded extremely similar to the device that Zari made for our Portland 2024 showing. Now, maybe there's surviving schematics or the rough prototype is in a box somewhere, but we got the word from the lead programmer, Robert, and the executive producer, Henk. There has never been evidence of this 10-player adapter because there never was one. So whatever was printed was maybe just off-the-record frustration at Nintendo, or maybe to drop a story in the press to pressure Nintendo, that the 16-player adapter thing, that actually got to Nintendo Power, that is shocking, and I still have no idea how to explain that. Though when I explained to Henk that we had made our own devices, he was interested.
I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it in action. You must have videos of it.
Absolutely. I have tons of videos of it. Oh, one quick thing. Everybody in the Faceball credits had a nickname, and some of my friends in our little Discord group was curious why you were. What was your nickname, Sushi? What was that? Was it because you were living in Japan at the time?
No, probably because of Blade Runner. Blade Runner, his nickname was Sushi, somehow. I remember he's sitting at the counter and they called me Sushi, cold fish.
Yeah, so why the nickname Sushi? Blade Runner, which that's a movie I've seen before, but when he said this, I had no idea what he was talking about. And that is actually because he was talking about a line from the theatrical cut, the one that has Harrison Ford's like really bad narration. Sushi. That's what my wife calls me. Cold fish. I've never actually seen this version of the film because by the time I saw it, there were all the director's cuts out there that don't have that narration. Also, it turns out Henk is a really big Blade Runner fan. He starts listing off his favorite lines. And then we start talking about the Alien movies, which Henk then points out.
Yeah, we're talking about everything except Faceball at this point.
Yeah, MC Hammer and Blade Runner. Add that to the list of random things that happened in this video. But while I had him, I wanted to ask him about the other ports of Faceball. First, I had to ask him about the Game Gear and PC Engine CD ports made by Riverhill Soft.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was my brother. He moved to Riverhill Software.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, he's a big fan, and he would have been through our, bulletproof software days. So he worked at Riverhill Software, and I don't know. I didn't really get into the how can I say? I didn't really get into how good of a job they did. Maybe I didn't. I don't remember.
And what about that unreleased port for the Virtual Boy? Yeah, Nico-chan Battle for the Virtual Boy. Any comments on that?
Oh my God! Yeah, gosh, we made Tetris for Virtual Boy, and we sold more Tetris than Nintendo sold Virtual Boy.
Well, I mean, that's quite an accomplishment. Also, that's not really that impressive.
We sold 150,000 copies of Tetris, and they didn't get to 150,000 units on Virtual Boy.
Yep.
That was a disaster for them. There was a time when we were going to publish Faceball through Nintendo. We went through long development. It was like, I want to say years, and we kept on changing it, and they kept on changing it, and then at the end they said, you know what, this game is starting to become similar to a game that we're working on internally, and that was Mario Kart.
Oh, I was gonna say Star Fox, but okay.
No,
yeah.
Mario Kart. They were Mario Kart. So basically, you're running around shooting things. You have those.
Yes, the battle mode. Uh-huh.
The battle mode, yeah, exactly.
And there was the rumor that there was an NES version of Faceball that perhaps started development and was canceled, or was pitched and not greenlit. Any comment on that?
Well, I don't remember, but the problem with the NES is there's only two controllers.
There were 4-player adapters if you really wanted to. There were a handful of 4-player games.
Yeah. But you would have to have a four-player split screen. I mean, everybody would be playing on the same screen, which is theoretically possible. I don't remember that.
And what about the Faceball 2000 source code? We've modded this game already, but if we had the source code, we could do so much more.
I don't know if I have the source code. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Robert is more likely to have the source code than I do.
We've asked him, and he said no. He said, talk to Henk. That's all, Henk. I don't have it. Sorry.
I don't think it's possible, because I have boxes full of stuff from the old days. It's possible that it exists somewhere.
Okay.
But I really don't think it's relevant. But it's not relevant because, that code is all about fake 3D when we have real 3D now. You could do it in Unity. You don't have to do We don't have to jump through all those stupid hoops that we had to jump through back then.
But that's the appeal. That's let's push this old tech now that we know more. Let's take something old and push it further than we ever could back then. There's still that homegrown hobbyist appeal of
okay, fine, but that's not commercial.
Sure. Yes.
We're talking to somebody about Faceball right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say when is Faceball 3000 coming?
Location based. Have you seen the video that we made for Faceball 3000?
No. Did you release it recently?
No, ages ago. I made this as a where is it? The Faceball 3000 video. What was it called?
Faceball 3000 maybe?
I'm looking for it and I can't find it.
I don't know how you started stuff, but I can find it and text it to you again.
Send it to me. Oh yeah, you can text it to me. That'd be good.
Yeah, it's a small file. It's a small video.
Yeah. Can you do it now? I'm in the middle of a Zoom with someone talking about Mini Maze and Faceball.
Okay, I send you.
Thanks.
While he was looking for the footage, I asked him about the Flash game, which when you search Faceball 3000 is all that shows up. But apparently, there's another Faceball 3000, one that's never been shown before, and Henk showed it to me. There was audio, but the noise cancellation on his mic drowned out most of it.
Computer check. Still at 100%. Buttons charged. Buttons charged. Buttons charged.
When was that made? Oh, there we go.
701.
Wow. Yeah, that would have been. Wow, I can't imagine if you would release that the same year that Halo came out. That would have been such a. That was so amazing to see.
I wouldn't be the one behind it, and I wouldn't be finding a development team and getting them. Somebody else has to supply the energy. I can supply the IP.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the vision, because I did spend a lot of time on this game. I bought this game from Jim Yee, you know that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, for a ridiculous amount of money.
Oh, really? Would you care to disclose? Or?
I want to say that I bought it for about $1 million in 1991.
That's not nothing. Wow, yeah.
Yeah. So, I bought them out. It's still available if somebody wants to pick it up. I'm not in the publishing business or in the development business anymore.
Okay.
If somebody wants to...
That's what I hear, because I've asked, when is Faceball going to come back, on Virtual Console, or is Faceball 3000? But so it'd be somebody else then.
Yeah, somebody has to do it. Somebody has to get behind it. I can give them advice and have my ideas, and they can use the video that I made as as a springboard.
Mm-hmm. So I guess if anyone out there wants to make Faceball 3000 and they got the money for it, Henk is looking to sell. I'm not sure what he meant by this location-based version of Faceball that he's apparently making. He didn't elaborate on that. And before I knew it, 90 minutes just flew by and I had to say goodbye. Thank you so much, sir. I hope you will watch the documentary when it's out, because this has been a really personal and fun story to tell. And having you be the kind of cap at the end of it will just be this has been a very wild journey, and you have continued to keep it wild for me. So on a personal level, sir, I say thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
But Henk had one request for me. All right, thank you so much, sir. You take care.
Take care. Please don't call me sir.
Henk, my friend, thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. This turned into the most personal project I've ever worked on. It actually took me 2.5 years to make, and I could have made it longer, but I'll leave it to Bob and Zari to pitch in because this is their story too. Faceball2000.com, Don's old fan site, has been resurrected, and I assume will be the central hub for all things face from here on out. Zari has her own channel, and I told her it's best for her to explain the more technical stuff since it's way out of my depth, and she's literally the one who broke it all open anyway. She'll have a video out by the time this goes up, and you should direct all your technical questions to her. As I sit here, Zari, Bob, and I have been asked back to Midwest Gaming Classic in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so if you are in the area, come play some Faceball. But here we are. This is actually the end, and it is a bittersweet moment, because really, once this video is finished, I'm done with this project. I have other things to do. So the future of Faceball 2000 is now up to Bob and Zari, I guess. This project has been in the background of my life for the past 2.5 years. And in that time, I had mold poisoning, I had surgery, I lost a parent, I lost a dog, moved, and got divorced. They were probably the worst 2.5 years of my life. But this project, and for a time, the Zebo Games videos and the Denshidego videos were something to keep me anchored to the ground when it felt like just things were falling apart around me. I had this really awesome story to tell in this really fun, happy moment in my life. So I really hope you liked this video, hope you learned something. I know there's a chance that this video will completely bomb and I've already completely cratered my channel, but I know the real ones watched this far, so thank you. It wouldn't be the first time I had to claw this channel back up, so don't worry about me. Thank you to all the Patreon supporters who were there for me this year especially. Another project that really saved my sanity was UDOG, the exclusive Patreon show. Making those videos once a month is so much fun and rewarding creatively. I want to say thank you to everybody who's shitposting or giving me feedback in the SSFF Discord. I'm about to turn 41. I have been doing this for 17 years, and I am so grateful that anyone still watches me. I'm sorry I'm slow. Sometimes, I always try to give you my best shit that I can, if only just to say thank you for believing in me and watching. I have so many unfinished, much smaller projects that I'm dying to get back to now, so you all keep me powerful, and I hope you all stay powerful as well. We can't stop now, so I will see you again real soon, and thanks for watching. All right.